So in this tutorial, we're going to talk about subbasses and making your sub-bass sound super interesting and wacky and dynamic and just like a little bit more original than 99% of bass music that's being made today, where they just play a note at F0 44 hertz and just have it play for like a single bar, and or maybe they'll do like quarter notes of F0 44 hertz, and it's a little bit boring. You know, there's the sub bass, even though it's only, you know, one single sine wave, it's like it feels perceptually like about a quarter or a fifth of the entire frequency spectrum. You know, there's a lot of room there, and there's more interesting things that you could do with the sub bass than most people really take time to consider. You know, so if you think about a sub bass, it's ideally a pure sine wave, right? And the only things you can really do with a pure sine wave and keep it pure is change the volume and change the pitch. Now you can change the pitch either through melody and have it stick to, you know, the piano roll and change in 12 equal tempered steps, or you could try pitch bending it in interesting ways, or you can use like microtones or something and instead move it through like 31 steps or something. What's cool about sub bass is it will be harmonic with pretty much any melody above it, because the wavelength is so goddamn long, and also the fact that you don't really hear sub bass as much as you really feel it. So you could take much more creative liberty with what you do in the sub bass region than what you can do with other melodic and harmonic ideas without compromising the sound too much, which means be more free with it. So I got these general ideas and principles through I was listening to Detox Unit, Recent Works Volume 3, and incredible mix. Highly recommend you listen to it if you haven't. It's just a very cohesive and brilliant piece of music that rivals and is better than most albums that are put out today, and sounds good. And if you pay attention to the sub bass, it's very dynamic, and a lot of interesting movements are happening with the sub bass. What I set out to do is I wanted to make a sort of rack that emulates that, in that it will induce artificial dynamics for you, so you don't have to think too hard, and you can just like enter a couple MIDI notes and then it'll spit out interesting patterns that you can change with the parameters. And then I also was inspired by the Indian percussion instrument called tabla, which is it's a drum, and it sounds very cool, and you can modulate the pitch in interesting ways. I'm just going to play an example here. That was fucking awesome. Highly recommend you come listen to this entire piece, and if you're interested in percussion and learning instruments, learn to play tabla. I've been studying it for the past few months, and it is mind-blowing, incredibly deep subject, and just really fucking cool. Anyways, so you notice when you're listening to that, the pitch modulates and bends in all sorts of super cool, interesting ways you can use rhythmically, and it adds so much more character to it that you never really touch on if you're just playing in like a normal scale. So I created this rack that essentially, here, I'm just gonna play the song and just pay attention to the sub bass and what it's doing. So what's going on here is I have your normal sub. It's just a pure sine wave, and then I'm also playing it with the overtones above it so that I can keep it kind of clean for processing. And then it's being sidechained by the wacky sub down here. Whoa. So whenever this plays, the main sub doesn't play, and so they're kind of talking back and forth and taking turns playing. And so how I made these sounds is through this pretty convoluted rack here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play this rack with the drums, and how the rack works is every time the kick plays, it sends a signal through white noise that gets sidechained with a gate connected to the kick, which goes into an envelope follower, and the envelope follower controls parameters regarding the pitch. So every time the kick plays, the pitch is going to go down to the default subnote that I played, which is like F or something, and then it's going to play, and then with the release that you designate from the gate and the envelope follower, it's going to gradually go back into some crazy, wacky pattern that is controlled by a bunch of LFOs that are chained together. And so this is what it sounds like. So notice every time the kick plays, it goes to the default note, and that way they're kind of talking to each other, and it has a cool like call and response thing, and it just sounds fucking interesting, I think. Now if I hit random and just change every single parameter randomly, totally different pattern. That's fun. And so you could use this to just spit ideas out super quickly. So how did I make this? Well, first I'm just gonna try to describe what I did here, and then we'll get into the weeds of it, and I will program an entire new subrack thing like this. So this is essentially, I have an LFO going into the offset, controlling the offset of another LFO, which controls the offset of another LFO. And all of the parameters regarding the rate, the depth, and the phase are all controlled by different parameters in the rack, right? So what happens is when you pass all these through each other, they add together and create a new, entirely unique pattern that is designated by like the phase of all of them. So if I change the phase in one of these parameters, it's going to change the end result in some interesting way. And so by using different combinations of these parameters, you get a different end result. And this result controls the pitch of the sub-bass that you can see here. And every time the kick plays, it's going into an operator, which is playing white noise. This operator is muted. We'll just call this like sidechain me or something. And then this goes into a gate, and then the gate is sidechained to the kick so that the noise only plays when the kick plays, and then you can control what the release is, which then goes into an envelope follower. And the envelope follower controls a multimap, and the multimap chooses what the pitch is going to be. So you notice max here is at 50%. That's basically no pitch change at all. And then min is being modulated by this LFO. And so the envelope follower is just going to turn this input knob here, which when it goes all the way up, it's going to play default, then it's going to go back down into the wacky pattern. That's the general principle of how it works. If you think you can program and create something like this on your own, just given that description, I would advise that you do. I think it's invaluable to get in and get experience in programming these things yourself. You know, and you're going to end up with an end result that's going to be a little bit different and a little bit more unique. And if you have ideas, then you'll be able to implement them yourselves. And if you just taking in this knowledge, you'll be able to apply it to other things. And I think that's how you really get good at sound design, you know. So from here, let's just get into it. Here's attempt number like 5 or something. I don't fucking know. Okay, so we have drum loop. Beautiful. Okay, so what we're gonna want is we want our sub bass, which is just gonna be a sine wave. I'm gonna use Serum because I like to use Serum, though to be honest, I never really do anything aside from use the very basic wave shapes. So it's kind of nonsensical for me to use Serum all the time, and I'm just using like 1% of its capabilities, but who cares? All right, so let's get our sub at F0 because we're making bass music. So, you know, why ever be original? Fun. And yeah, if you're not listening to this with a sub bass or headphones, you should do that. That would probably be helpful. So first, let's sidechain our kick to the sub, because you always want to do that, really. So when I'm doing sidechaining, I like to use this filter type knob here. So basically, when you sidechain the kick to the sub, it's going to, let me consolidate this. The sub's only going to come back in once the kick is completely muted, which is like down here. But I mean, the initial click is here, and almost all of the sub is gone right here. So the sub comes back here, you're going to hear this audible pumping. And that doesn't sound good. I personally, I don't like the sound of it. I know there's some producers that are really good that do like the sound of the like super audible sidechain pumping, but I personally hate it. So what I do is I turn on this filter knob, which what this does is the input sidechain signal is going to get filtered. So if you filter it up to the really high end using this high pass filter, you're only going to hear the click of the kick, just the very initial transient, and then all this subtail is not going to be considered when it's sidechaining. So then now you can really dial in exactly how much you want to sidechain using the release. I know a lot of producers use like, I don't know, more convoluted envelopes and stuff, but I mean this mostly works for me, unless your kick is like really kind of weird, like has like a big hat or like some weird high-end tail. This trick is pretty good to sidechain a lot and get a lot of control over it. Like you can hardly even hear that there's ducking. Anyways, okay, let's get into this. So we have our sub bass. Let's just make a group for this. Now first we want dynamics, right? Because we want to be like Detox Unit, because Detox Unit is cool. Shouldn't we all want to be like Detox Unit? So let's get an autopan. Autopans are great for inducing dynamics in all sorts of sounds that you want. So, you know, when you turn it up to 100%, it's gonna pan between your two speakers. So the autopan works by turning on the volume on and off on the left and right speaker. It's not actually physically panning the sounds left and right, it's just turning the left and right speakers on and off. And then you can change the phase in how they are turning on and off relative to each other. So if it's set to 0, they're both turning on and off at the exact same time, creating a tremolo effect. I'm gonna saturate the sub so that you can hear it a little bit more clearly. Fun. Now is where you can get real exciting. You can use multiple auto pans and have them both moving at different rates. Fun. So let me get an envelope follower just so we can like really see the pattern. And then, all right, if it's set to 1/4 and 1/3, then after 4 revolutions of this, after the 1/3 plays 4 times, this is going to line back up. So this pattern lasts 1 single bar. Right? If it's set to 5/16, it's going to get really fucking nutty because 5 doesn't fit into 16 easily. So this is going to take, I think, 5 bars before it fully resets, which if you notice, 5 bars is more than 4 bars, right? So that means this pattern is actually going to reset with this length, so that if you're using this over a 4-bar loop, it's going to create a polymeter with your sub-bass pattern, which can sound cool. Who knows? Experiment, right? So, okay, so let's get back to this. Let's turn all these on. And then let's change the amount so that they don't actually fully mute the sound every time. So I'm gonna turn this into a group, and then I'm gonna wait. No. Turn this into a group, and first let's put the amounts here. Right, and then let's put the phase or the rate right here. And then let's take the, honestly there's space for a 4th auto pan, so we're gonna use a 4th auto pan. And rate needs to be set to synced. And then we can have even the phases over here, because we don't have to just use this on a sub bass, you know. So I mean, typically if you're using a sub, you're never going to want to have it pan left and right, but you know, you can throw this on anything that you want, and then you can induce dynamics artificially. Oh, I didn't set that right. Use the first offset, second offset, fourth. Okay, beautiful. Now I can hit random. And then look at that. Let me set the phase of everything 0. So there's a pattern right there. You know, you can hit random again. Anyways, so yeah, that's, oh, and then you can also create macros. So we can name this like intensify, you know, and then create a new one. And we can name this one like tremolo or something, you know, and then you can create a bunch of different patterns that you like using the random knob through exploring, and then you can end up throwing them on different racks yourself. Okay, so we have this. Let's make this less fucking intense. Slow all this down. I'm gonna turn down the drive again. All right, now let's go back to, all right, so we can create dynamics, right? So let's name this dynamics generator, and then you can go into your user library, you have your audio effect racks, and then you just slap that in there, and now you can drag your dynamics generator onto anything. So if you have hi-hats or something, just real quick. Right? So like, let's say if you get like a bunch of crazy percussion, or just like really fast, really busy percussion, you could throw a dynamics generator on here. And then after the fact, if you don't like how wide it is, you can just adjust the width like this. A little bit of reverb or something. So this is already, like, this element here has so much information with very minimal effort versus, you know, that. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. So let's go back to this sub rack that we're working on. All right, this is another take. I love doing takes. Okay, so we have dynamics generator, and we want to apply the same sort of principle of adding different auto pans, or I suppose really just different LFOs, because each auto pan is just an LFO controlling volume, and you can adjust the phase for each individual speaker. We're gonna apply that, but with the pitch, because that's really the only other parameter that we want to control regarding subbasses for interesting dynamic movements, right? So first, let's take our rack and let's expand all the macros. Now, also, I just want to go back for a second to the dynamic part. So you'll notice it happens to be the case that sometimes when the kick plays, the kick will play at a point where the added auto pans are quiet, and thus there's like no bass there. And I want to have it so that whenever the kick plays, the sub is booming. So I just want to sidechain the amount of each of the auto pans to go down to 0 whenever the kick plays, so that you know, it turns instead of a sub that decays to 0, it's a sub whenever a kick plays and it decays to 0. I want a sub where a kick plays and then it decays into the auto pan pattern instead for interesting movement. So to do that, we're going to use a multimap. Let's take the multimap, slap it down here, and then we're also going to want to create a sidechain to the kick. Now we're going to do that within this instrument rack. So we're going to create a new chain, and we're going to throw operator into the chain. So operator is going to be white noise, except turn off the filter. And then we're going to turn off the operator because no one wants to hear it. And then we're going to put a gate inside, and the gate we are going to sidechain to the kick, and we're gonna make the floor negative infinity, so it goes all the way down to silence with a release. And we're actually gonna take release, and we're gonna put it on this mapping here. Now we're gonna take an envelope follower, increase the gain so that the envelope follower reaches the max, and then using release, let's give it a little bit of fall percentage, just like smoothing. You can now control the release every time the kick plays. This envelope follower goes, and you can now map it to stuff. So let's take that multimap, let's map it to the multimap, and we're going to place this multimap inside this rack, because really what we're going to do, I'm going to delete all the mappings to the mount for each of the auto pans. What's really going to happen is the multimap is going to control the mount for each of these. And now the macros are instead going to control the max. So every time the kick plays, this input is going to go to 100%, and 100% can then correspond to whatever amount you want. So it's going to go up to the amount that you specify. If that made sense. So we're going to put each of the maxes on here. And then you can name these like amount 1, amount 2, amount 3, and 4. And then you can adjust them. So you'll see alright, I just recorded the entire video and was looking it over and realized I fucked up, and the dynamics generator is doing the inverse of what I want it to do. So it didn't sound right, but pretty much all the logic was correct. So right now it sets that every time the kick plays, the amount goes up. I want it to be the inverse. So to do that, I'm going to go to the envelope follower, and then the first knob, which is the knob that I used, I'm just going to inverse the min and the max. This is what it's supposed to sound like. So the dynamics are fucked for the rest of the video and not exactly how it's supposed to sound like, but everything else is pretty much correct. So like right here, I can have it set. So I only have 2 of them turned on, one at 1/8 and one at 1/16. And so let's get an envelope follower just to see what it's doing. Make it sound really cool. Also, changing the BPM is interesting because since these are all set to the grid, since they're set on rate, they're going to move up with the BPM. However, the release is dependent on milliseconds, so it's more the booming effect, quote unquote, stays the same. So we have this little sidechain thing set up. Now we're going to want to do this, but also affect pitch. So let's get an LFO and let's throw that here in serum, right? Okay, we're going to take an LFO. We're actually going to take 3 LFOs. Now, I'm going to lower the depth of all of the LFOs because what we're going to do is we're going to add the LFOs together, and when you add them all together, it's going to increase the depth, and then they're going to start slamming into the max and min parameters. So you'll see what I mean by that in a second. So let's just set these to different rates. All right, I have 1 bar, 1/3, and 1/4. So if I make this 1 bar control the offset of the next one, now I've effectively added them together because this is moving it up and down with the same rate. Right? And now we're going to make this one control the offset of the next one. And now this final output is effectively adding all 3 of these together to create a new and interesting pattern. So I'm going to take the mapping, and I'm going to start mapping rate and phase to different parameters. So let's just take rate and map it to these. And let's take phase, map it to some stuff. Right, yeah. Now I'm going to take the offset. Oh, why is it still? Oh, I was moving the phase around. Okay, and then let's go. Oh yeah, you can't adjust the rate down here, unfortunately. Don't know why. I have no idea, but you can't make it so that the minimum is not 1/64th, for example. But you know, we'll live. We'll be fine. Okay, so we got a cool pattern here. All right, I'm gonna map the offset of the very first one to, I don't know, here, and this is effectively gonna move the offset of all of it up and down, right? So let's examine this. Let's take pitch, make sure that we can automate it. Let's map it to pitch. Let's lower the depth for everything. Now I want to be able to control what the max and minimum range is, and you can do that here. However, you can't automate this for whatever reason. So the way you get around that is by using multimaps. So let's take a multimap. Oh god, let's put the multimap here. And then instead of controlling the coarse pitch, you're going to control the input, and then that is going to control the coarse pitch. And now we can control the max and min here. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to map min and the max. Turn on the saturator. Now, this is going well, I think. It sounds pretty good, but I want it to have the same effect over here where every time the kick plays, this goes to 0. So we're going to use another multi-map. I know, this is gonna get a little convoluted. So this multi-map, okay, let's think about how this is gonna work. So I'm gonna want this envelope follower to control the input here, right? Now, I'm gonna want something to control the coarse pitch. Now, when this is set to 0, I'm going to want this to be at, when it's at 100%, that means the kick just played. So I'm going to want it to be at neutral, which is going to be pitch equals 0. And where is that? It's at 50%, because that's in the middle of the range. So right now you see when the kick isn't playing, it's at 0. And then when it plays, it goes up to 0. When the kick isn't playing, it's at -64, and then when it plays, it's at 0. And we just want it to be whenever the kick isn't playing, it's fluctuating like crazy. How do we do that? We can map this to here, which we just determined was the pitch. It's supposed to be 50. So now every time the kick plays, it turns into just a basic sub, right? So now I want to add, okay, so right now we have it so that every time the kick plays, the pitch goes to neutral, default, and then when the kick doesn't play, it goes out into the crazy wacky pattern. However, what if I want to have it so that every time the kick plays, the crazy wacky pattern plays, and then with the release time set, it goes into default, back down to neutral, no fluctuations. So to do that, we're going to need to use another multimap. I know, we're just getting more and more abstract here. Okay, it took me a second to think about this. All right, so we're going to want to, this multimap is currently controlling the minimum and maximum range of the pitch, right? So max, min range. That is the function of it. And so what we're going to want to do is I want to create a knob so that when I twist the knob, I switch the function of min and max, right? So this is controlling this. So I'm going to create another multimap where you aren't controlling that, but you're controlling this, which is at 50%. And then you're also controlling this. And this one's at 50%, and then they're going to fluctuate differently. So I'm going to map these the same way. Thus, these are both doing the same thing. And you are going to control min, and you control this guy. So now, there we go. Okay, that took me a while not to edit that. Okay, so now, in summary, I have wacky LFO goes into this guy, which these max and min ranges are basically, the function of this is to control the max and min range. And then this guy is controlling the min here and the max here. And these are just inverted from each other, so that when I turn this knob, it's just going to simply swap the min and max over here. And thus, in the end, what this min and max is doing is designated what am I doing when the kick is playing, what am I doing when the kick isn't playing. And so if it's like this, it's going to be how we had it originally. And then if I turn this knob, it's gonna do the inverse, which can sound interesting. So I'm gonna name this 808ify because it sounds almost like this turns it between an 808 and like the inverse of that. I don't really know what to name it, but and then there's a few more things we could probably map. We can map depth. Now again, I don't want the depth to be too much, so I'm gonna set the max to 50. And I'm gonna do the same thing here, 0 to 50, and then the same thing here, 0 to 50, and then let's just hit the random button. That one's kind of boring. Okay, I see an issue. So the min and max can like go all over, and it doesn't really help to have like min go positive and max negative, right? So we can just set okay, this is min frequency, max frequency. So we'll set min frequency to be between 0 and 50, and max frequency to be between 50 and 100. So now you can just mess with all these different parameters. So you also might be hearing, if you can listen closely, there's some artifacting. I believe this happens because the envelope followers are pretty noisy, and sometimes like the noise from all these different parameters modulating can create artifacting sounds. So if we solo this and then boost, yeah, you can hear that. That's not fun. So let's get rid of it. That's fun. And then I also want to make it so that I can change the actual decay of the sound after the kick plays. And so let's do that with the utility. And then we can just use this. And this is going to go, yeah, from 50 to, I don't know, somewhere between 0 and 50. Fucking dB decay. I don't know, decibel decay. So yeah, I think that pretty much explains it. And so at this point, you effectively have two racks. When you randomize the buttons here, you're going to be changing how the frequency moves around. Well, that sucks. And then if you change here, this changes how the dynamics are moved. And then what's interesting is, so we notice that, there's some stereo information, and you want your sub to always be mono. So you could just mono the actual sub region, and then whenever this gets pitched over above like 100, 120 hertz or so, it gets panned around. Add some like extra dimension to what's going on. So yeah, yeah, pretty much this is the end result, I suppose. So we can just name this fucking Paleac funky sub wow crazy XD, and then you can throw this in your user library. Okay, so yeah, we're pretty much done at this point. You have a cool sub generator. You could just draw a single note in, randomize this a few times, get a cool output, maybe record it down to audio, so then you can combine it with another sub pattern, automate these parameters around so that the sub pattern transforms, actually draw melodies with your sub as well as do all this. You know, there's possibilities are really endless. And yeah, I know it was a little bit convoluted, but I think that you really need to get in there and actually get experience with programming per se, with like Ableton devices and Max Effects, because once you figure out a few techniques and you learn like really the limits of what you can and can't do in Ableton, it opens up an entire like horizon of sound design possibilities. Yeah, so I mean, it's for that reason that I'm not going to just release this as a rack you can just download, because I feel like I would be cheating you in the process. I think you need to get in there and really gain experience and get a headache trying to logic your way through, you know, using several multi-maps and chaining them together or something. Because once you do that, you can then build more things and have your own creative ideas instead of just relying on watching someone on YouTube give you something. You know, teach a man to fish versus giving a man to fish, or something like that. You know, be creative. Apply these in as many ways that you can think of. Yeah, if you had an idea while watching me build this and you're like, oh, maybe I should try this other wacky thing, then go for it. You know, try to do it. Maybe instead of just chaining the kick to the sub, what if you also chain the snare to the sub as well, but the snare controls different parameters, and so you have different elements in, like, different drum elements all interacting with the sub pattern in a different way, so everything ends up just talking to each other. That could be really interesting. You know, just go crazy. And yeah, I hope that was helpful. Maybe in the future I'll be like, I'll just release all the sub patterns for you to download yourself. But no, I really think if you want to learn sound design and you want to have unique sound design, you need to start creating your own like patches and effect racks and stuff. Because once you start building these together, you can just chain them together. Like my user library, I have an absolutely absurd amount of audio effect racks. And when I want to get creative, do sound design, I just start throwing multiple of them in a series and see what comes out. Anyways, yeah, I hope this was inspiring and that you go create something cool. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.